Welcome to DeFi by Design, where we talk all things blockchain and cryptocurrency while striving to educate, empower, and enrich.
It's your boy Andy, and welcome back to the DeFi Slate YouTube channel. Smash the like button on this video, that really helps us out, and sit back and enjoy the content. Thank you very much.
What is going on, DeFi Slate fam? Welcome back to the DeFi Slate YouTube channel. This is DeFi by Design number 73, and we are super stoked to be talking with the lads behind Router Protocol today, Shubham and Rami. I hope I said you guys' names right.
It's Romani. You can call me Ram. It's easier.
Ram. All right.
Yeah,
Ram and Shubham.
Yeah, yes.
So, sweet. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, guys. We're stoked to talk about what you guys are building over at Router. Really the bridging protocol. I mean, the infrastructure is so necessary to the ecosystem as, you know, the more chains expand into kind of like this app specific chain world. You know, we'll have all these isolated chains that we want to get interconnected. And you guys are the ones, you know, really making it happen. So it's a pleasure to have you guys on, and I'll let you introduce yourself and how you guys get started.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can get the ball rolling. So Router Protocol has been around for close to 18 months now. The team behind Router has been in DeFi crypto for, I would say, since 2014, almost. Been building a bunch of products through the cycles. Router was born from the need for interoperability that we saw fairly early on when DeFi Summer started in Q1 2020. And, you know, we were looking at a lot of opportunities, yield farming opportunities, etc., that we personally invested in. And, you know, and what we saw was, you know, the Ethereum congestion in the Ethereum network sort of was a big blocker to a lot of folks actually taking advantage of these opportunities. And that, of course, led to the rise of all the other layer one competitors, EVM as well as non-EVM options, right? And so we were actually working on a DEX on Polygon, and we built a really cool property on Polygon called Define. And you know, it was amazing, especially if you come from Uniswap. You know, it's just fast transactions. It's much cheaper than Uniswap, etc. But then we realized not too many folks were actually coming onto the platform, and that's when Shubham and I were sort of thinking about what we could do. I mean, it's like you build a nice restaurant or a club just off Brooklyn Bridge, and then you take off Brooklyn Bridge. There's no Brooklyn Bridge, right? So how do folks from New York City come to your venue? So that was the sort of the analogy that we use all the time, right? The city's analogy, right? So that was the genesis behind Router that got us thinking on how we could sort of, you know, set up this, get these chains to talk to each other and communicate to each other. And you know, if you think about it, you know, cities and, you know, how they have those infra links between them that facilitate the movement of liquidity and messages and all the ideas and all that. So that was, I guess, the overall genesis behind Router.
Awesome. And getting involved in 2014, you know, that actually predates Ethereum and all these layer ones and all of the new applications that were built on top of the Ethereum, you know, protocol. So could you kind of, you know, give us a quick overview of the evolution of the products that you've built over time, kind of, you know, starting at 2014? What was the sequence of products that you guys built that ultimately stacked up into Router?
No, absolutely. So just to give you some context, you know, I come from traditional finance. I went to engineering school in India, and then, like a lot of Indians, ended up in the US in a technology company. And then I did an MBA in the US, and then I ended up in Wall Street. In research and banking and investments, etc. I spent almost 10 years between 2005 and 2014 in traditional finance, if you will. And the way I stumbled into crypto was while I was doing a lot of the traditional market making for pre-IPO securities, you know, all these unlisted shares, Airbnb and Alibaba and all these names, right? And there's a pretty interesting time where, you know, I would sort of get these securities, the shares from investors in the Valley who wanted to exit before the IPO, and I would find buyers for them in Asia. And there's been a bonnet around how we could build a product around this, right? So this was, I guess, eventually this became security tokens and securitization and all those things that we sort of later became familiar with. But that was actually my entry point into crypto, right? So I actually built a platform on a Bitcoin sidechain that would securitize these tokens of all these private tech companies. This was 2015, I would say. And then at some point, Shubham came on board, and then we ended up building. We actually built a bunch of really cool projects that ended up not taking off for various reasons. Some of them were regulatory, some of them were just product market fit, right? For instance, we built possibly around the time Bitwise was big in the US, we were sort of building a similar product out of Asia, India and Singapore, and we are tied with the big stock exchange in India, NSE, and it's been pretty big. But just before we went live, the Indian central bank said, you know what, cryptos are not really legal, so we don't really have a framework, so you can't do that. Right? Then Shubham actually had this idea of building a stablecoin DEX. So we actually built the world's first stablecoin DEX way before Curve. Right? This was on 0x using the 0x Relay framework. Again, way back in 2018. And we were competing with Paraswap and Radar Relay. These were pretty big names in the Valley in 2018. The only difference was these guys were all funded for $15-30 million. And here we were in Bangalore trying to explain to investors why crypto was a big thing and why they should invest in us and so on and so forth. So, but the experience is amazing, right? We were early to the game. We understood the value behind Ethereum, and that got us the ability to sort of get in front of really cool developers. Got us relationships with folks like Polygon, for instance, right? They're a big ecosystem from India. What else have we built? We built, and then for a bunch of time, for a fair bit of time, we were actually doing. Yes, we built a crypto derivative exchange.
Algorithmic bots, high frequency bots. For some time.
Right.
And then we started doing DeFi. So we started exploring what all challenges are there with Uniswap, V2, identifying what we can do where gas cost is very cheap, right? How we could avoid inconvenience to the user. So then we started working on meta transactions, gasless transactions. We forked Uniswap, we deployed it on Polygon, and then we added gasless transactions to that, so users could really use the product without having any gas, right? So those were early days challenges that we faced with Polygon, and one of that was not able to port funds or latency while porting funds back and forth to Polygon. So then we thought of a solution like, what if this can be improved? What if your block publishing mechanism can be separate from your bridging mechanism, right? So that's how we landed with Router. Setting up a standard where one blockchain can talk to other blockchain. Because we all know, right? So the base idea of a blockchain is it can't unexist, or it can't be stopped, right? So saying that a new solution to solve a blockchain for all sort of categories like Polkadot won't take down Ethereum for sure, right? Then you need to have some standards between these chains, and same as you have in Web2, TCP, IP. Right? So then we started working on these standards. How could fund movement look like between chains? How could data movements, actions, events, those could look like between chains? So that's how we landed with Router. Right.
Awesome. Yeah, and the communication protocol is becoming even more important as the amount of chains grows. And I'm curious if there's any communication between, let's say, Ethereum and non-EVM chains, since that's one of the gaps that is currently kind of in the market now. Is it a communication protocol that takes things from one blockchain, kind of puts them in an off-chain silo and then takes that and communicates it to the other chain? Or is it really two blockchains communicating with one another? And what are the implications of connecting EVM compatible chains with non-EVM chains?
So yeah, I'll give you my perspective first, and then I'll let Shubham sort of deep dive into some of the technical details involved, right? So, our approach is we are looking at a liquidity super mesh in the sense that, most bridges, when you look at how they're designed, right, you have bridge A and bridge B, blockchain A and blockchain B, and then you have a blockchain C coming in. Typically, the way these things are designed, blockchain C ends up building a bridge to blockchain A and then a blockchain B, right? That's not too bad. You have two bridges, right? And then you imagine a blockchain D that needs to be added to the whole equation. So now we have three bridges, right? D to A, D to B, D to C. Now we extend that, so it increasingly gets pretty complex, right? So what are the key design patterns, or one of the things that's sort of embedded into our ethos is, the scalability of this thing. So what we call the liquidity super mesh, right? So you can add, you can have chain 1 and then chain 2 and then chain 3, chain 4. And then when chain 4 comes in, the liquidity from chain 4 is instantly available to chains 1, 2, and 3 and vice versa. It is not like an individual bridging thing. So the scalability is super important, right? So within that framework, so at the moment we're focusing on EVM chains, but going forward, I think Terra is going to be the first non-EVM chain, and then Solana, and then Algorand is also in the mix, right? So pretty much every major non-EVM chain can be integrated as well, right? So all of them are on the roadmap.
Yeah. So again, as Ram told, right? So to build adapters, cross-chain adapters, which are compatible with EVM and non-EVM chains, it's not an easy job. Because the language that Ethereum understands and the language that Terra understands are very different languages, right? It's like you're trying to do some mediation between two different countries, which doesn't rely on same language, and the information travel becomes very hard. So then we had to sort of like rewrite our whole adapters to be compatible with Terra. But the beauty of this is, so let's say we are able to deploy a Terra adapter in our protocol. So the moment that adapter is deployed, Terra will be able to communicate between all the chains that we support, either EVM or non-EVM. So our main focus is to make adapter compatible with the protocol rather than with the chain that it's going to transact to. So once that is done, transactions can happen between all the nodes in that protocol. Yeah. Also,
Nice.
so
Yeah.
few more
Go
things
ahead.
that we are, so few things in work, to be honest. So like what we are exploring in Terra is right now it's all about fund transfers with Terra. We are thinking of delegating instructions. So for example, you have UST or USDC, right? So USD on Ethereum, you want to stake it on Anchor, right? So right now it's a 3 to 4 step process. You move your funds using some bridge, you go to Terra, you create a wallet, then if you have UST, perfectly fine. If you don't, you have to swap it and then put it in Anchor. We can make it a 1-step process. You have USDC, we'll swap it wherever we get the best rate. It can be in Terra or in Ethereum. We convert it to UST, we transfer the UST and then stake it in Anchor. That way, it's sort of like you are also exposing all the protocols on Terra to be interacted with all sort of layers on different chains. Now, developers can think of cross-chain applications and not restricted to EVM at all.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at, I mean, probably dates me a little bit, but I started my career in the Web 2 era, right? And early on, if you had a Word file in your Microsoft Palm device, and then this was before iOS, I guess. But if you had a Word device in Apple, and then you had a Word file in Linux or Unix or whatever, they were pretty much incompatible, Like if somebody sent you a Word doc from their Sun Solaris terminal, I mean, the format would be so messed up, you couldn't open that up on your Microsoft operating system, right? So eventually, the idea is that blockchains will get there. I mean, all the complexity around, why should put it out of the way? Why should you, as an end user, be worried about if your trade is going to get the best execution in Solana or Terra or whatever, right? That's all complexity that should be, not visible to the end user. The other analogy that I love using is when you book an airline ticket, you go to Expedia and you say you want to go from New York to London or Florida to wherever, Bahamas, let's say, right? And you specify your field details, which is, you want a business class or whatever, right? And then that's it. And then what the engine does in the background is it goes through various booking engines and figures out what's the best deal for you, and then gives you the list of options, right? So why can't you do the same thing in the blockchain space, right? I mean, you want to swap from Ethereum to, let's say, Bitcoin, and then let the engine behind do the complexity of, are you getting the best fill in Solana or Uniswap on Terra or whatever, TerraSwap on Terra, Uniswap on Polygon or what? So that's the whole idea, right? Eventually we'll get there. And that's where I think Router is sort of, and other interoperability projects sort of play an important role in abstracting out the underlying complexity and giving the user a seamless user experience.
Yeah. Yeah, the interoperability is critical to the health of the ecosystem. And you mentioned the communication layer. I'm kind of thinking, I really like the analogy that Shubham used, where it's kind of like two countries communicating with each other. You guys are kind of like cross-chain diplomats, right? And there's new protocols developing this like data availability layer that creates a central, the storage for all that data. And my understanding of Router is the data availability. Someone could, whether it's an individual or a blockchain, could grab the data from this availability layer and utilize Router to communicate that data to a different endpoint.
Yes,
and
very well.
Yeah, and how do you see that interconnectivity playing out, where we have different cross-chain applications and there's more chains that are connected to this one central data availability layer? How does Router supply data, I guess? What are kind of the implications that are unlocked when Router is fully mature with a data availability layer and the communication that can send data between different chains?
Yeah. So what I would assume, right? So when things are very mature, you could really achieve something like atomic swaps across chains. You don't have liquidity on one chain, perfectly fine. It will be settled from different chain. You're trying to sell your Matic on Ethereum chain, which doesn't have enough liquidity of Matic. It will be transported to Matic chain, paid back to you on Ethereum without you knowing anything about that. So similarly, you'll have access to all the dApps on a different chain without moving to that chain. For example, Aave. We could really grow to a state where Aave doesn't have to deploy their protocol on 3 different or 5 different chains, but from all those 5 different chains, we have access to all the data that Aave has. And we could trigger all the contract calls of Aave without literally moving our funds to that chain. In at least from users' perspective, right? I could earn Aave yield, I could lend, borrow, participate in governance, all the things without moving to that chain. And that doesn't only happens with assets, right? That happens with data, some sort of data that you need. You would want to move some sort of information. Some syncing has to happen between chains. So similar product that we have it actually, and we are conducting a hackathon on that product, which allows you to do that. So it synchronizes data between 2 contracts across chains without user knowing about that. But for sure, it's with users' consent. So now you can build utilities like cross-chain Tornado, utilities like cross-chain DAI, where DAI can be minted across chains. Right now, DAI can't be minted across chains, right? Even though DAI is in all the chains, handling
Yeah,
its
like I could
collateral
lock up.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think we were on the same thread. Like, so I could lock up Ethereum on one chain in a vault, and MakerDAO would mint DAI on a different chain.
Yeah.
Yes,
Awesome.
we. So
Yeah.
you'll be shocked. We have a prototype of this, to be honest,
That's right.
and we did it with Router.
Yeah. So we actually, it's interesting what's happening, right? Yes. So what happened is, when we looked at how we could grow Router, I mean, there's a lot of other competitors who just focus on the cross-chain asset transfer use case. There's a bunch of them who will get one asset from A to B very fast, right? I mean that's an interesting game, but that's a very easy game to crack, and it's going to be super commoditized. So we went back to the drawing board and looked at what is Router's real vision, right? I mean, enabling true cross-chain interoperability and enabling cross-chain messaging. That's a superset of the specific problem of cross-chain asset transfer, right? So what we then did was to sort of engineer the system, architect the system around that framework, right? So what we're now doing is all of us have gathered actually in Dubai this week, and we got a bunch of external hackers and external developers, internal developers. We're all hacking out some really cool ideas around cross-chain asset transfer, cross-chain Tornado Cash, cross-chain Aave, cross-chain Texas. Really cool ideas have come out, and a bunch of teams, and we've sort of identified a bunch of developers that reached out and wanted to work with us, and some of our leading developers as well internally. And they're all just working on some really cool stuff. And so by the end of I guess in the next few days, we're going to unleash some of these into the wild, and some of these are going to be standalone projects like in the Terra ecosystem.
Yeah, my imagination's running wild with when someone can click a button on a front end and it triggers a contract call on two different chains.
Right.
That really unlocks a lot of possibilities. And then, like you're saying, blockchain C, my one click, makes a contract call here and there, and then based on those transactions, it triggers some transaction on blockchain C. And
Yeah.
I mean, this has implications, from like risk benefits, where if there's cascading liquidations, maybe someone can trigger a stop loss or some backstop to prevent liquidation. So there's different liquidity and trading implications, as well as I think some of the cross-chain NFT applications are really interesting as well. When if you stake your NFT on this chain, you get some benefit on another chain, and you kind of have like these different, like these worlds start to collide when you have the cross-chain functionality that can combine applications from different chains, and you have these games that can start to interact and intersect with one another. That's really interesting, and it hasn't really been unpacked. I think the one protocol that we saw kind of dip their toes into it was the Layer 0 and the Stargate protocol, and how they started to combine some cross-chain liquidity programs there. It hasn't quite been developed to the extent that Router is doing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I keep telling folks, I mean,
Would you want to talk about the idea that we are working on?
one of the-
So basically, one more cool.
not too much alpha.
Not too much alpha for sure. So one cool stuff that one of the team in the hackathon is working on is, so as you name the product, right? So can you do something with that product where I have two different chains where different yields are there? Can I move my collateral without interacting with the second chain while being on one chain? I can't do that, right? I can build that with Router, and team is building that with Router. So you can really optimize that protocol by using Router. So you can move their yield from Polygon to BSC if yields are high on BSC without going to BSC actually.
Yeah.
So their solution is
the,
not a cross-chain solution; it's a multi-chain solution. If it could have been a cross-chain solution, I should be able to manage my whole portfolio while being on one chain. I need not go on BSC, Phantom, or Avalanche, right?
Yeah, and what is your take on any cross-chain versus multi-chain. There was a thread that Ethereum that Vitalik posted, a few weeks ago, and he pointed to some security vulnerabilities in cross-chain transfers and really supported a multi-chain thesis. Do you guys align, or do you see any gaps in his reasoning that you guys would like to fill?
So, to be honest, first thing is where we want to be with decentralization and what all we want to solve with decentralization, right? What I feel is right now decentralization is trying to tackle only one aspect, and that's funds. And I'm very confident that it will grow to a state where it would try to tackle requests, right? It would try to tackle media. And that will be the state where you would need interoperability, right? It need not be that secure, but you would need some connection between these decentralized systems.
Right.
If the bridge is decentralized at its own level, perfectly fine. If chain is decentralized with its own frequency, perfectly fine. But then you would need some connectivity between these. So there can't be a single chain which can handle data plus transactions, right? Yeah. Security plus scalability. So then you would need some bridge between those. So I honestly feel, assuming that we would not need bridges and we would not need interoperability, that's to be fair, it's not valid argument. So you can't grow to a vision where you would want a decentralized Twitter for sure.
Right.
Because you can't really scale a decentralized Twitter if you don't have interoperability. You can't scale to a decentralized e-commerce, right? And then the ultimate vision of decentralized internet, that's not viable at all if you don't have interoperability. Because then also you'd want your funds to be handled by most secure chain and your data to be handled by most scalable chain, right? And then if you want to connect your consumer and your payment services, you would want to interact with both of these chains. And then some linking is required, right? So even if that linking is a bit less secure than the main chain, we would need that linking. Bridges are not robust as the land, but then you would need bridges, right? The overall infra throughout the town is very robust.
Right.
In other towns, it's also very robust. But does that qualify to say that we don't need bridges, we don't need linking between these two towns? No, right?
I mean, look at what's happening, right? You have all these chains that have some really smart folks working on them. There's a lot of smart capital riding on these chains, right? I mean, you look at Ethereum, of course, but Solana, Avalanche, Terra, Algorand, Aurora, Phantom. I mean, all these guys are going to go away. I mean, it's like New York, London, San Francisco, Singapore, Dubai. All of these cities or chains will have their own fans and venues and adherents and community and energy and so on and so forth. Right now, if we accept that, you need to have flights between these cities, right? And the first attempts by the Wright brothers, a lot of them failed, right? 300 meters, 500 meters, right? And then a lot of folks died, and that's the equivalent to bridges getting hacked. But you see what's happening, even when the bridges get hacked, there's so much capital, there's so much interest in this space, right? I mean, when who did Jump Capital backstop? I think Wormhole got hacked, Jump Capital and Terra, the whole ecosystem came, right? Ronin got hacked. I think Binance and a bunch of guys came.
Thor got hacked.
Thor got hacked.
Three
Right?
times it got hacked.
So the smart money is betting that the benefits of this is bleeding edge technology. There's going to be the early guys are the entrepreneurs, the pioneers are going to sort of pay. They're exploring, they're taking risk, and therefore there's this chance that they will fail. But I think the ecosystem is mature enough to understand that this experimentation is worth it, right? And that's how technology moves forward, right? And then you see that playing out in the bridging space as well. Given that we have all these blockchains, we will need bridging solutions because folks are going to sort of, even if it's risky, people are going to use it. I mean, again, not to beat our own drum, but I mean, all Stargate or all these other guys out there. I mean, none of them have upgradable contracts. I mean, somebody said, why does router charge slightly higher? And that's because we have upgradable contracts. So if there's any security flaw, we can instantly upgrade the contracts. But any of our other pure play bridges, not the communication place, right? They're all are fundamentally bridges. All these guys have a long way to go, but the good thing is there's a lot of capital backing this sector, and there's a realization that ultimately we'll need interoperability, which it's a key theme.
I honestly feel it's too big of a challenge to be ignored, to be honest. Saying we don't need cross-chain solutions,
Right.
I don't know how valid that is.
Right.
When there's a ton of liquidity in all the chains, and then all the users of that chain is seeking for some alpha on different chain, right? You are restricting your Ethereum users to not explore Solana. They'll find a way to explore Solana for sure, and that's a centralized exchange exit. And is that exit better than the solution that we are pitching? No, that's even further centralized. So I'm not talking about completely decentralizing a solution, at least partial decentralization or somewhat low security than the whole chain, but it's still far better than the solution out there. It's far better than the centralized exchange exit options, right? There you don't have custody of your funds.
Right. And we see that frequently, like the most recent example, and there might be, conversation here about the decentralized social media aspect of it, was the purchase of Twitter, right? Elon buying Twitter. So approaching this from the angle of, like you're saying, not your keys, not your coins. And if you're on a centralized exchange, you don't have your keys. I had a question for a friend of mine that I work with, and it was, what if I own Twitter stock when this purchase goes through? It essentially means that I don't own Twitter stock anymore, because without my permission, Elon came and he bought my Twitter stock. So I don't own the Twitter stock, even though it's in there sitting in a brokerage account, with my name on it. It's not my keys. I don't own it.
That's right.
And the smart contract benefit of this really enables, you to retain custody of your tokens,
right,
no matter where they are, whether it's, on this decentralized rails,
right,
or if it's going from, one city to the next and you're taking a flight, you
right,
still hold ownership of those coins. And it's not put into someone else's hands where they can sell it without your permission.
Yeah.
There is proper penalty being put onto the system right now. Ethereum is also maturing to a state where they would want to do a proof of stake rather than proof of work, right? Then if you implement same level of security with some blend of MPCs that show signatures, and then clustering MPC, having partial on-chain consensus and off-chain consensus, you can come up with a somewhat decent solution, far more better solution than the centralized exchanges. Right?
Yeah. And the other thing is, these flavors are going to exist, right? If you look at Ethereum, diehard Ethereum fans are going to say, BSC is not centralized, or Solana is not robust enough, for Terra is a big Ponzi scheme. I mean, these are all stuff that, we see on, you open up Twitter, there's like multiple viewpoints, right? Everybody's an opinion. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a Web3 is, the beauty of Web3 is completely democratic. And so between that whole trilemma that Vitalik described, right, scalability, security, and decentralization, you have Ethereum that is high on the decentralization axis. You have Binance Smart Chain, for instance, it's very high on the scalability axis, right? And then you have Solana, again, very high on the scalability, not so much on decentralization. So, and there are various folks that want various things. Some people love BSC, some people love Solana, and presumably going forward, there'll be some apps that sort of prefer Solana. There'll be some apps that prefer Terra. There'll be some apps that will continue to use Ethereum, right? So it's not like this one chain that's going to sort of be around all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. There's reasons to be on any one of those 3 points on the scalability trilemma.
Yeah.
Some prefer security.
Yeah.
Some are going to prefer speed, and then others decentralization. And we're seeing different market participants kind of float to those corners, and some chains have really embraced one of those corners. You mentioned BSC. They are really going after speed and scalability, and not too focused on decentralization.
Right.
Whereas Ethereum is more at the center, and they're looking to bring more scalability alongside the security model that has worked for them over the course of a few years.
Right.
And as this transition to proof of stake plays out, you know, we're going to see even more chains, and they're probably going to look like roll-ups, and then the L2 race, if you will, or the L2 battles, where these different layer twos are starting to compete for users, starting to compete for liquidity, and they're all interconnected through something like Router. So I'm curious, how does Router kind of communicate? Well, we talked about it, right? Like the communication between these different layer twos, that someone could execute a transaction on one rollup, on one L2, and then it triggers another transaction on a different L2, and kind of bringing this together where you have the communication protocol to connect each of these different L2s. I'm curious how it reshapes the experience you had in traditional finance, where you were going and market making on some of these exchanges. With this level of scalability and throughput, what does the IPO process look like when someone wants to launch a new token? Do you see interconnectivity between traditional markets and decentralized markets, or does software really eat the rest of the traditional world? How do you see the interconnectivity between crypto and the fiat system working out?
All right, so I think this is fascinating, right? There's so many different layers to that. I mean, one thing you mentioned, of course, is you're spot on, right? I mean, with something like Router, a new project can come in and you can just immediately launch on every chain, right? And then still have the ability for every user to sort of interact with the dApp from their favorite chain right now. In terms of what that means for the user experience, I think we sort of touched upon that earlier. Ultimately, a lot of these things are going to be, a lot of the complexity is going to be abstracted out. The user just worries about how we sort of get the best trade, the best yield, or the best way to achieve the cross-chain governance problem that he's trying to solve, or whatever that he's trying to solve for, right? And it all comes in a nice front end in a smartphone or whatever, right? And then you don't have to worry about, okay, I go to MetaMask, I change my RPC, and I move to Solana, I use a bridge to move over my funds. All that is done. I mean, people won't have to worry about that most likely in the next year or so. It's going to be commonplace, right? And the third question is around how it's going to change traditional finance, right? I mean, that's a loaded question. So what we're seeing right now is a lot of folks trying to come in. I mean, the most common, I've seen, maybe 6 pitches in the last 6 months around, let's raise money from traditional markets, promise them a 10 to 12% yield, and invest all that in Terra and Anchor and get the 19.5% yield, right? I mean, I see a lot of those plays, and I think, specifically that might be, depending on where you're on the risk threshold, may or may not be a good idea, put everything in one protocol. But I mean, going forward, we'll see a lot of those interesting plays where, you already, you see FTX lets you sort of trade traditional market equities, right? And then there are plays that are sort of plugging into the bond market, etc. And I think a lot of these challenges are not because of technology. I think a lot of it is because of regulatory sort of constraints that they have, the barriers, right? Like this bond markets have a lot of US regulatory issues. Equities have a lot of regulatory issues that they're to contend with. So the problem is more regulatory rather than the other market that's ripe for disruption is the betting and the gambling market, right? I mean, if you would let the open up completely the playing field, you'll see a bunch of decentralized protocols addressing the whole gambling problem in a far more efficient manner than right now, right? Auctions are another interesting problem that these markets can solve. I think Gnosis sort of did the V1, but I think obviously there are far more evolved solutions now, right? So a lot of these things are going to be regulatory, not technical. That's my sense.
Yeah, the regulatory landscape is a blocker for innovation for sure.
Yeah.
You have all this open source technology out there, and it's it's kind of stifling innovation by preventing people from developing the projects that already proven demand.
Yeah.
And it's the regulatory obstacle that's kind of breaking. I mean, it's breaking up this pace of innovation. When there's an inclination to develop something that would kind of provide value, but there's this permission, like you got to get permission from the government in order to actually deploy that project. Whereas in this landscape that we're familiar with in decentralized finance, it's all permissionless,
Right.
and it's really move fast and break things. You can deploy really the project that you're looking to add value with. And you mentioned on FTX, right? Like the stocks and the traditional markets side by side with the crypto markets, the lines are really starting to blur between like a stock that's on a brokerage, and then, for example, a synthetic token that might be minted from synthetics and track a similar price oracle. Ultimately, it's an inefficiency, right? To have like the stocks and traditional equities markets like liquidity isolated away from the synthetic token and that liquidity market. If we could bring this together, ultimately, I mean, it would create a more efficient system, and that translates into less fees, more opportunities, and so on and so forth.
100%. I mean, if you look at regulators, right? I mean, they have a tough job, right? I mean, they don't have the whole picture. They're looking at, infra, coal, oil and gas, healthcare, and all that. And then the one thing among the 10 other things, 11th is crypto regulation. And they look at, who are my constituencies? Who do I need to keep happy? These big banks who write checks for me, the big billionaires, they want access to DeFi. They don't care, let them have it. The small guys, let's stop them from accessing Coinbase, investing in DeFi. And why? Because there'll be 10 guys who make money, but there's one guy who might lose money and sue the company, and that's going to sort of reflect badly on me, right? And it's sort of, and I'm not being libertarian or hardcore Republican or something here in the American context, right? But I think the whole decision making also reflects the fact that you have folks that are making decisions without complete information, and also with sort of skewed incentives, misaligned incentives. There's a conflict of interest there, clearly, right? I mean, why would you let the large banks play crypto and not have the average Joe Schmo have the same opportunity to sort of change his life by investing in crypto? Just because there's one fringe case where somebody's going to get chipped off his money or whatever. I mean, again, there are scamsters out there. We've all seen a lot of these scams, but I think it's got to be balanced. You can't just go one way or the other. It's got to be contextual. It's got to be balanced. It's got to be nuanced.
Yeah. It's an assumption on behalf of the regulators to assume that someone with less money is less sophisticated in the industry, and can't point out a scam. I'm eager to see like a world where the banks and the contracts, and we're starting to get there, where it's not really the funds that really make the difference in this like new play to earn economy. It's kind of like if you contribute your time, then that is your currency. And it's not like there's no elite whales that are out there where the new financial platforms are pulling their liquidity. It's more contribution of time. And if you are spending your effort and your resources on a specific chain, that might be singing a song in the Sandbox. Like if you're there and you're kind of like providing value to that ecosystem, and it might not be financial value. It might be entertainment or information or data transfer, or some filling some gap somewhere. The focus for liquidity in this case, really the make or break, like what makes someone more important to one of these platforms is going to be what they're providing that platform. And we're seeing all of these applications expand beyond the financial applications into more of these entertainment and information.
And the other exciting area that's really interesting is proof of physical work, right? I mean, Helium, for instance, right? I mean, you set up a router and within a broader mesh network, and it's not a big router that a big telecom company has set up. It's be something that you operate in your living room or bedroom, and then that becomes part of an overall network, and depending on how much traffic you facilitate through the network, right, you sort of participate in the economy and get helium tokens, right? And I think that's going to be a huge wave. I mean, I saw a project out there that just incentivizing folks to exercise, and there's an NFT angle and a number of steps and all that, right? I mean, it's fascinating how that's going to change, because you can think of that as almost like gamifying a lot of things that need to be done. I mean, in a country like India, where more of us, right now, we're not in India, but I mean, a lot of us go back to India, and there's a lot of poverty, a lot of opportunity, a lot of guys who want to make some, do some hard work and make money. And this, like Philippines and Axie Infinity, what happened there, right? If you look at the, I would call the global South, not the developed world, but the developing world in Africa, India, Southeast Asia, parts of Southeast Asia, there's a huge opportunity for a lot of folks to contribute and sort of enhance sort of their lives significantly through some of the emerging models like proof of physical work. So I think just the early days, right? I mean, it's like we're sitting in 2002 and thinking about what's going to happen when Web 2 really hits the ground. Right? I think the very, very early days. That's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah. The realm of possibilities is limitless. Really, the monetization strategy for these Web 2 companies was watch an ad. You got to spend your attention and watch the ad, and we'll pay you to watch the ad. You'll get something for free, or we'll pay you or whatever. Now it opens up this world of possibilities where physical labor, your heart rate, you can monetize all these different, any piece of data that you're looking to optimize, you can now monetize with cryptocurrency smart contracts.
And then you add in the self-sovereign identity, where it's just the data that you want to reveal that is being disclosed. It's not your whole birth history and health history and everything that's up on Facebook, right? I mean, it's so that also adds an essential layer of privacy, so that your critical info, your private info, is not the product anymore.
Yeah. I see. Innovations and in the insurance industry as well. If you can, incentivize people to be healthier, insurance premiums should go way down. So we'll see. Maybe there's an application to.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we were joking, right? I mean, the biggest, one of the biggest guys in India is the Reliance Group, or there's a bunch of these Reliance, or in the US it'd be Elon Musk or whatever. So tomorrow, let's say Elon Musk decides, I'm going to give away free DNA tests to everybody who signs up, right? And then, can you imagine? He's going to get a lot of traction. Everybody's going to sign up. I mean, not everybody, but a shit ton of people are going to sign up. And hey, here's my DNA info. Sign up for perpetuity, right? And then what they're not realizing is he's going to sort of use that and sell that to the pharma companies, insurance companies, and other corporations. And that's going to lock up these guys forever. I mean, it's going to affect their careers, the jobs they get, the insurance rates they get. It's just going crazy, right? And then this can be misused as well. So there's a lot of...
Absolutely. I mean, Meta, Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg chose to monopolize the data economy. And I'm realistically, or I guess, cautiously hopeful that Elon takes a more decentralized route than Facebook did and Zuckerberg did. Yeah. Cool. Guys, this was an absolute pleasure. We have one parting question, and then any closing thoughts are absolutely welcome. We ask everyone that comes on the podcast, if you were to explain blockchain and crypto in general, and more specifically Router, to anyone in the world, dead or alive, who do you choose to explain it to, and why?
Wow, that's a good one. Good one.
I didn't get the last part exactly. What was that? So, whom I should be?
If you could explain, if you were to shill your bags to anyone in the world, who would you choose?
It'd probably be a bunch of really smart school kids who just sort of, great 12, 13, 14, just getting interested in technology, coding, and, they're thinking about their careers and programming or whatever, right? So we want to go and tell these folks, right, why is decentralization important? Why is blockchain important? And then, again, why Router important sort of follows from that. I don't know, products like Router, but I guess that's the impression.
I like that one. We hear Bill Gates, we hear Elon Musk, we hear you name it. We haven't heard teenagers, school kids that are starting to think about these concepts. They ask really good questions. So
they're the future, right? They have what they call the Buddha mind, right? I mean, they come with an open mind, and they ask the silliest but the deepest questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you really
Awesome.
require some fundamental thinking, to be honest. Right? So things are very, very hardly defined right now in crypto. Blockchain, linear architecture again. You would want to think something else, right? Sparse architecture. Why only linear? Right? So those questions, I guess, someone who's starting fresh would make more sense because you're not too close to the problem. You can think without adding much more bias to that. So students are will be very very cool pick for that. Some researchers maybe.
Yeah.
Some brains you
Yep.
need.
I mean, disruption always comes.
The implicit bias.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm saying disruption always is orthogonal. I mean, folks in an industry rarely disrupt the industry. Right? I mean, the guy, sadly, he sort of died in a fire. I mean, the Vappos, the shoe website. I mean, he's doing something else, right? And then he created a shoe website. Zappos, right? The shoes website, right?
Zappo, yeah.
Yeah, Zappo, and then even Elon Musk, right? I mean, crazy freak of nature. Right? I mean, he knew nothing about rockets. He's disrupting that industry. But I guess he's probably not the right analogy. But I mean, typically, you see an industry that gets disrupted by somebody coming orthogonally, something from outside the industry. None of the specialities or none of the attunes them. Like even DeFi is going to disrupt finance big time. But DeFi has been built by programmers, not finance guys. So in a way, it's software eats the world.
Yes, it's handling finance, but it's all done by the
Yep. Yeah.
No
Well,
one
that-
ever thought
this
of
was great,
concept
guys.
of farming in traditional systems.
That's right. Yeah.
No one even thought of utility tokens, farming, and as a concept, right? But then we have farming.
Yeah. And the combinatorics of those applications combined with really all the other ones we talked about today are endless. Super cool, super exciting. Thanks for coming on, guys. It was a pleasure. Where can our audience where can they find you? Twitter, Discord?
Yeah, Twitter, Discord, routerprotocol.com. The Twitter handle is Router Protocol. I think Telegram is again Router Protocol. Yeah. And Shubham is, what's your Twitter handle?
It's ETH Sensei, ETH Sensei.
Yeah. And I'm at CryptoMan_Ram. So, fingers.
Sweet. Yeah,
get us up.
we'll get your handles down there in the description. Sweet, guys. Thanks. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
When